Our guest this week is a man I have seen at many trade shows for many years. In fact, I'd have to say I might even see him more than I see some of my extended family because just I see you around. He likes hockey and trade shows, so we have a lot in common. He's the Senior Vice President of Sales at EDE, where he drives revenue and growth for his clients through trade show marketing. He's also a top trade show voice on LinkedIn. Welcome to the podcast, Jay Minash.
Welcome to the Engaging Personalities Podcast. I'm Anders Belanger, founder and CEO of Engagify, where we're on a mission to rehumanize business through engagement. We believe that we can all be more successful if we can command attention and deepen connection. So stick around to the end of the show and we'll reveal how you can be our next guest on a future episode. So let's get ready to engage.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. So I got you on here. Like I said, we see each other a lot in the shows. And I just want to say that first off, on LinkedIn, I saw that you are also going to be speaking at Exhibitor Live. Is that correct?
That's true.
In Nashville,
Yeah.
coming up. And what is your topic? I'm interested in what you're going to be sharing with the audiences there about trade show. Oh, and for the people listening and don't know what Exhibitor Live is, it's a trade show for trade shows. It's very meta, right? And so there's a trade show for everything, and there's even a trade show for trade shows. Jay, what are you going to be speaking on at that event?
Yeah, so my creative director and I will be there, and we are talking about designing for decision makers through analytical design. And a lot of the focus of our presentation is just how to create the right attendee flow for your sales process, what the messaging should be. There's so many booths that are just confused with what they're trying to do, what they're saying, who they're trying to attract, or trying to attract everybody, that we're trying to, show people there is a better way, talking to the specific group that is most likely going to say yes to your solutions is what we're trying to teach people how to do.
Nice. So you're kind of making the booth a bit of a filter to and have the messaging speak and engage the minds of the people who are actually going to make the decisions, as opposed to wasting booth staff's time, all the giveaways that you give away to people who are never going to buy. So in a way, you're making a booth a lot more efficient by doing something like that.
Yeah, that's the goal. Everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of people are trying to boil the oceans. Like, everybody is welcome in our booth. And it's like, well, the reality is, sure, they should all be welcome in your booth, but that doesn't mean they need to be engaged with the salesperson or the marketing team and getting the follow-up after the show. It's like, we want to make sure that the people that are going deep into the booth and having those long and important conversations are the right people. And that is a lot of the focus. It's a lot of it is about just aligning sales and marketing and making sure they're all aligned on their goals and what they're talking about, what they're pushing. That ultimately, if you're not pushing pipeline or revenue, even awareness should be tied to a metric goal. And that's a lot of where our focus is.
Got you. Yeah, because it's interesting because a lot of times with trade shows, you get these two camps. You got the quality and the quantity camp, right? And never the tween shall meet is kind of what sometimes you see, because you've got people who they just want numbers and they want to drive the number of leads. And usually that's coming down from up above, right? A VP of marketing or CEO or someone saying, hey, we're going to go big. Let's have these numbers. And then there's also sometimes you got, on the flip side, the quality people. And again, sometimes it's also coming from up above. But what I find is that when you get so far into a show and they see their numbers are so low because they're trying to go for such high quality, they kind of get like a little, kind of thing. So it really comes down to strategy, doesn't it? Because that's where you probably lend a lot of expertise to your clients is thinking it through, right?
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, it should be coming from the higher up level and making sure that your goals on the floor are aligning to what they want. Because if you're not aligning to them in any way, shape, or form, your budget's going away and they're just not going to believe in the mission of what you're trying to accomplish. So even if it is an awareness goal and quality or quantity is the metric you're going for, there's a difference between everybody and still getting that mass quantity, but also making sure it's the right quantity. It's the right people within the masses of the ocean out there, and asking some key questions. Because if you have a happy hour, you're going to get everybody walking the floor. You're going to get people like me that I'm definitely not a lead. It's like, oh, cool, happy hour. I'll grab a beer. You could scan my badge for a beer. Sure. And I don't even drink a lot, but hey, if you're going to give it to me, it's a good place to hang out and talk to the folks in your booth that, well, are leads for me. But yeah, there's too many people there. It's like, if you even come within 5 feet of their booth, like, yeah, just let me scan your badge. And I always tell people, I'm like, hey, I'm not a good lead.
Yeah,
You don't want
me
to scan me.
too.
They're like, we just want the numbers. And it's like, it just like hurts my soul.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could be helping those people for sure. You know, get more focused and get real about it. But you know, again, it comes down to what is your strategy, or is there a strategy at all? And then maybe that's what we're seeing with with some companies. Yeah. So I see you all the time. Like I've been saying, at the shows, your boots on the ground. At these shows, and I imagine, I mean, that's great for lead gen, for meeting people, for being with your clients and tending to them, right? What was that by default or design? That you're so accessible, or tell us how that came about.
It's definitely by design. Early on in my career, it was all about let me email everybody and call everybody possible. And the reality is, email is becoming less and less effective if you don't have something of value to say. And you could only say so many things about, oh, you're planning for this show, and like having a relevant touch point. And when I meet these people at a show and I have a conversation, and they see, I'm not this terrible salesperson that's just trying to get in the door and like sell them whatever I can. They're like, oh, it's a real human being that actually cares about what I say, is listening to what I say and having that conversation. It now has them responding to my emails, or commenting on a social post and things like that. So our business specifically is so relationship based that the likelihood of getting in without any kind of face-to-face interaction is pretty minimal. And it makes sense, we're in a face-to-face business, so the face-to-face networking really does work well. And hey, you want the high numbers of quality leads. For us, they're going to be at those shows.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes is, no matter how much you click from place to place, it'll never replace face to face. Right. And so there
I
you are.
like
And
that one.
and I think when you are, again, just uh, omnipresent, at the shows, people seeing you again and again, that sense of familiarity that you're
Yeah.
building and the sense of trust. I remember years ago when I was just doing magic, being a magician, I'd go to these showcases for these fairs and festivals, right? And you'd
Mhm.
go and do a little sample on stage and try to get a tour booked by all the bookers in the audience. And I would only do it when it was the local one that I didn't have to travel to showcase. And of course, all these people know that, right? That you get lots of locals, but it's the people who have that consistent effort over time and develop the
Mhm.
relationships that would become very successful in that kind of circuit, if you will. And I think that's kind of the same experience you're having. What do you think? Do you track? I'm just curious, and I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, but what might be your kind of like, not sales cycle, but like from the first time you meet someone till you actually do business? Have you seen, a certain length of time that it just kind of takes in terms of the relationship building, or is it kind of all over the map?
So there's a few variables to that. So when you're on show site and you are talking face to face, people don't want to disappoint you. So they're often going to be like, "Oh yeah, we got this big opportunity. We'd love to meet with you," and then you never hear from them again. And maybe I said something wrong. Maybe I didn't follow up in the right way. There's so many things that could come into play. But there's also that, hey, I don't. People don't like to say no, especially to your face. Most people are non-confrontational. But in most cases, if we have that quality conversation and there are a few synergies between us, within, I would say, anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months, there will be an opportunity in front of us. Whereas if
Mm.
we're not talking to them at a show, I mean, it does shorten the sales cycle for us too. But I'll add, for us going to the shows and meeting these people, obviously that is, priceless for our lead gen efforts. But it helps you understand, for our industry, let me take a step back. It's really hard to do research on a show. You can read the show website, you can look at a company website, but you're not going to understand the flow of the show floor, or what other companies in that industry are really doing to go to market. So going to the shows is as much a lead gen effort as it is strategy. When I'm creating content for EDE, we do a lot of these industry insights blogs, which are really just, for RSNA is a good example. We just did it there, and it turned into a four-parter. The final one is coming out Friday. Whereas I'm just asking the exhibitors questions. In the past, I was just taking tons of pictures, or some people on our team were taking tons of pictures and like identifying cool elements or trends in the industry, whether it's lighting or technology, whatever. But it's like, we started asking, it's like, well, tell me about the ideal flow in your booth, and how are you getting people to your booth from the entrance of the show? And it's like, so it's a lot of research and strategy, because one thing we do know is that our win percentage in industries that we have clients is about 60%. Our win percentage in industries that we don't have clients is more like 15%. And I'm trying to bridge that gap. It's like, yeah, you're right. We don't have a booth on the floor to be like, look at this beautiful thing. but it's like, I know your world, and this is how I can, show that and prove it.
The finer points of differentiation, and I think we can connect on this with a trade show, is there's an energy, there's kind of a characteristics to each individual show and the attendees that come to a show. And it's taken me years like of making notes after every show to kind of really start wrapping my arms around what makes these crowds different, so that I can engage them and generate the crowds for our clients. But I'm guessing that you kind of see some of the same things play out at those shows that you specialize in, Jay. So let's talk about RSA just as a thing, because I did see a video that you helped one of your clients, and they were new to RSA, so they kind of didn't understand what that show is all about. So let's just kind of riff on that. What RSA conference is this cybersecurity conference in San Francisco? It's in May this year. What do you think about that show? What's, if you were to kind of describe it characteristically, what comes to mind for you?
Oh, first of all, I love that show, and it's funny you brought it up because I was going to bring that up as an example, and I'm going to say I'm fairly certain that's where we met in the first place. Maybe it was the Fortinet booth, if I had to guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a relatively unique show. I mean, I think technology shows in general are very different, whereas like they're just gimmick filled, and most of them are gimmick filled in not the best ways. Like, I think I saw 6 booths last year that had crane or claw machines where it's like, oh, win a prize. And it's like, I could not differentiate from any different one of those. So, Beyond Trust is the client you're talking about. And, they wanted to come up with a gimmick, and, where their marketing team is fantastic and they're very strategic. And I'm like, all right, well, we'll come up with a gimmick, but I need 4 to 5 questions from you that we can force attendees to answer, so that, yes, they go through the gimmick, they're getting the fun thing, they're doing the experience, but then your sales team has information that they're getting out of that they can use to follow up, to use, figure out if it's a quality lead or if it's just tire kicker, or if it's someone that has no need whatsoever, just wanted to go through the experience. So it's coming up with, yes, the gimmick is important. People expect to get something from that show, whether it's the experience or a sticker or a doll, but how can you, give to get, make it that, even out that playing field a little bit. And that is probably, the most important part of RSA, because every booth has some kind of gimmick at that show, but it's like, how can you tie the messaging together? How can you make those questions matter and do it so quickly that they're not turned off to do the experience in the first place?
Yeah, definitely that, dangling that carrot without, blocking it off or making them have to do so many, do too much work, right? To get the reward, and that kind of balance, because you do want a bit of quality. So when I think about RSA, one of the things that comes to mind is, for an attendee, it only costs about $100 to come to the show. If you know someone or you go to the right website of an exhibitor, you can get in for free. So what ends up happening is you kind of drop the quality of attendees compared to maybe like an AWS reInvent or something like that, where it's probably $2,500 US to attend, right? And that's to get on the trade show floor. So there's a little bit of that. The other thing that I notice, and this is just attendee wise, is that the cybersecurity guys are so privacy driven, and this happens at Black Hat as well, that they're like, they almost don't want their badge scanned. And it's like, come on, man. Like, you're at a trade show, you registered to come in here, like, this is how it works, right? And so just because they kind of play their cards kind of close to their chest, they're a little bit less willing to play, let's say, and with my presentation, it's about having a kind of unique experience and getting people into the booth and learning, but being entertained at the same time. So sometimes it's harder to win them over because there's security people. So that's one of the things I find. But you're right about, it's a wild show, right? Like there's a lot going on, and part of it, there's so many booths there. It's like the biggest cybersecurity show. So everyone's just trying to outdo everyone else. So it gets to be quite loud. It gets to be a lot of presentations, a lot of presenters. And another thing that happens too is you get like intersections where each corner of the intersection has presentations going like every half hour. So they just like battle each other all the time. So you're right, differentiating, finding that gimmick that you were talking about. I like to call it like a booth hook or an activation or something like that. Because you know what?
That's a nicer way to put it.
Yeah. Because sometimes people say, what we do creating engagement in the booths with our presentations is a gimmick. And it's kind of like, I don't want to cheapen it that way. It's kind of like, but in magic, a gimmick, what a gimmick is in magic is a secret tool that makes it work. And so in some ways, that's not a bad definition.
Well, it's kind of like writing headlines or a subject line for an email. It's like, I want a clickbaity subject line to get you to open my email, but the email is going to back it up. So clickbait, I always take it like that's super negative, but it's like, hey, if you're backing up that clickbait, it's okay. Same with the gimmick. It's like if the gimmick delivers, then we're all good. I was at AHR last week in Chicago, and there was this company, Navien, and they had this, they were talking about a new tankless water heater. And this is not a world I know anything about other than I have a water heater in my basement. And, they were doing water bottles with fruit infused, like a holder in the middle. And it was basically, the woman's like, oh, it's a gimmick to show off our tankless water heater. I'm like, well, it's brilliant. Like, it all makes sense, and it helps reinforce your story. And it's like, you can call it a gimmick, and that does have a negative connotation generally, but it's like, it's just reinforcing your messaging. And as long as there's a tie-in to what you're trying to say and get across, go for it.
And that's what's so critical, is the tie-in, right? When people see the relevance, then there's this, I get it, right? Kind of moment. And all of a sudden they have so much more respect for, the idea, the creativity behind it, bringing people, the connections, right? And that's the thing, is if you do something that is detached and disconnected from the actual messaging or the product or whatever the solution is, then it becomes kind of a desperate cry for attention, as opposed to something that is message integrated and cohesive with what they're trying to get across, So now let's talk about gimmicks, and let's maybe segue into technology, right? And not a technology conference, but technology and exhibiting, because every year new technology gets developed, there's new innovations. So what are we seeing out there on the trade show floor? Maybe what you're bringing to clients that is kind of new and hot and interesting, that attracts people's attention and to people's booths. What are we seeing?
I would say there are two things, all based in LED. What you can do with LEDs nowadays is it's insane. Whereas even 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, it's like, oh, that would have cost you $200,000 to do that. Now it's like you can literally do anything with LEDs. At NACS back in October, we created a floating LED can, and it was an exact replica to a Monster Energy can. And it was just floating, and it would, they would basically represent all of their different product lines, and it was tied to the rest of their technology in the booth. And it's like, it was so in sync and so cool. And, I talk about Monster a lot because that is one of the coolest projects I've ever been a part of and seen in person. But it was great because individual elements of that booth and the LED technology was just fascinating to watch. You walked into the booth, on the right side, there was just a product wall right there, and it had LED shelves where they just magnetically attached to the wall, and they had products on them. And the LED would highlight the shelf. It would shoot that shot over to the LED can floating, and then the translucent LEDs around the booth it would be a sizzle reel about that product line. So between the basically moldable LED panels that you can create almost any shape out of these days, to translucent LEDs, were just a great attract, where it's like you can see it from afar, but you get the true experience once you're like immersed in the space. So I mean, just everything. You can create LED rooms now. Like the Sphere in Las Vegas is a really good example. You can do that in a booth if you got a big enough space. So I think the LED technology itself and what you can create on a screen, and the shapes and the sizes and the different context you can do with it, is insane. We have a couple of projects coming up that one just got signed off, and a couple are in design right now, hoping that we win, that I will be excited to share, because they are just amazing. Like, the creativity, you kind of become numb to it. I mean, you've been to enough shows. It's like, oh, I went to CES, and I skipped this year. I was there in 23, and I'm like, people are like, oh, how is it? I'm like, I don't know. Like, there's a couple good booths. Like, you become numb to it. And it's like, when I get really excited about a design, and our creative director is the same, it's like, when we're excited about jumping into these things, that's how you did something good.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've seen, at Exhibitor Live, some of these like immersive experiences. You walk in, and, of course, it's like the walls are screens, so you can make it, and then you can pipe music in, or sound effects, or, sound of crickets, and you're in the woods, and, so it's completely immersive technology. So, it really is the, your imagination's your only limitation with and budget.
And budget.
Of course. Yes. Okay, very cool. So, and with, I just want to go back to that thing where you said with the floating can,
Mhm.
was that was that a translucent LED that the can was floating, or was it one of those hologram kind of spinning fan LED things, or how was the
No,
can
this was
floating?
literally a curved LED, and it was molded around a structure, and it was literally just hanging like a hanging sign in the center of the booth.
Oh, okay, got you. Okay,
And so it had a custom top and a fabric bottom, so you could access inside if any of the panels needed to be
right.
replaced. But yeah, no, it was just a circular,
Yeah,
perfectly, in perfect proportion to one of their cans, which is what made
okay.
it special.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love the idea of that it interacted with different parts of the booth, right? Like where it's kind of bringing things like so that the booth is a living, breathing,
Hmm.
it's animated. The booth's animated as opposed to, the old days of just very static kind of things. So that's interesting. Um, I want
Well,
to,
and just to
yeah,
add to that
go
before you
ahead.
move on, I think that's the important part of tech. It should never be the story. It should only be a part of enhancing your story. And I think that's where people start to get into the gimmicky tech side of technology. It's like, oh, look at this cool LED fan we
Yeah,
have. It's like, is it cool? Like, yes, it's a fan. Yes, it does something cool, but does it help tell your story or enhance the story you're trying to
right.
tell? And that's something people need to keep in mind.
It reminds me of what's the quote from Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park where he's like, I think we got so caught up with whether the fact that we didn't think about whether the fact that we should, like that same kind of idea with just because the technology is available, let's just throw the bells and whistles on without thinking it through, without the cohesive story behind it.
Very true.
Jay, let's switch gears for a second, and I want to ask you what I mean. One of them you mentioned already, where people scanning for no reason, just to get the scan, even though it's junk scan. What other frustrations or things that you see in terms of pitfalls that exhibiting companies will find themselves in, and it's just like, oh, I just wish they would do this, or these kind of frustrations that you might have because you see so many booths at so many shows. um, Share with us, what are you frustrated by?
I think wasted opportunities is something I think about
Mm.
a lot. And you can sign up for a trade show, you can have a cool booth, but if you don't put your process together, what's the pre-show plan, what's our plan at the show to engage people, and what are we doing to follow up? And thinking through all three phases and communicating the expectations to your team is a huge missed opportunity. Because if you just show up and you expect people to come to your booth, sure, you're going to get leads. Like I find it hard to believe you'll get zero leads if you don't do pre-show marketing. But you're spending, tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions. And it's like, are you not going to spend the time to come up with an integrated plan? Because that's what trade shows are. Trade shows are an integrated marketing plan. And if you're not thinking through the full cycle of what you need to do and how quickly you need to follow up, every day after that show, you're being forgotten. So if you don't have a plan for what you're doing the second you're getting home, or even before people get home with some kind of thoughtful follow up, you're missing out on business, and you're not going to get the ROI you could have. Yeah, you'll still get some good leads, and I'm sure you'll get some decent quality opportunities just by having a presence there. But I would say that is frustration is probably not the right word. It's, hey, people spend their money the way they want, but it's coming up with a thorough integrated plan and thinking through all the steps of how you can get people engaging with your brand.
Yeah, so just showing up is not enough, right? There's the
No.
the pre-show, during the show, and then post-show
Mhm.
piece to it, right? So that it's all connected, all integrated, like you said. Yeah, definitely there are, like you said, wasted opportunities that you see things, like, and I'll hear what the sponsorship levels are and what you get for them, and it's just kind of crazy the money that is spent on things that really won't have the impact that other things could have, right? That
For sure.
you're kind of talking about in a strategic plan that's well thought out. Oh, very cool. So what would be, no, this might be hard to answer. What is the best booth or the best thing you've seen at a trade show over the last year or so?
Mm. Best thing. That is a hard one to answer. I mean, there's so much cool stuff out there, and I'm trying to,
Yeah.
quickly go through my brain of all the trade shows I've been to. I think, there's a commonality of that. I think it goes back to my answer. It's thinking through that the theme of the booth and how you're tying everything together. I mean, biasedly speaking, that monster booth was one of the coolest things I've ever been a
Yeah.
part of, but it was because of how well thought it was. And Monster's lucky. Not only do they have the budget to do these cool things, they have an extensive marketing team, like one of the biggest marketing teams I've ever, seen. I want to say their marketing team is like 250 people, whereas, typically we're working with marketing teams that are under 15 people. So, the Monster booth was super cool and how it all tied together, and the tech and the story and how they, really played to who that Monster brand is. And I think that, you got to be true to your brand. So I would say Monster is definitely up there. I want to think of some examples that aren't EDE, because I see so many things out there. NRF, I thought Adyen did a really good job of telling their story. I don't know that I would say that was like the coolest booth out there, but I was talking to one of the salespeople, and she told me, she's like, "Hey, I'm brand new. Like, I don't know our products that well." I'm like, I don't need to know about your products. Again, not a good lead for you. But tell me, like, how does your booth work? Like, what is the journey that you would take an attendee through? And it was really well thought out, and they were jam packed the whole time. And I love seeing stuff like that, where it's like, clearly they know where they're starting attendees from. They know the messaging at that first stop. They're walking through the customer side. They're walking through the back end, and then they show how their devices work. And NRF, for folks that don't know, is like a retail technology show. So understanding all those phases of the product cycle and how it works is so important. So I thought that was a really cool journey. Stuff I see at CES, which even if I wasn't in person, the Samsung booth, the very front of it is kind of like magic every single year. The LG booth, same thing. They're just remarkable. Like I'm usually in awe of what I see at that show and how they can bring it all together in a remarkable short timeline that they do it too.
Yeah, man, trade shows are like little cities that pop up for like, 3 to 4 days at a time. And it is amazing the amount of work that goes into these things. And then all the firefighting that, your clients, well, I shouldn't say your clients, but trade show event managers have to do, just because things happen, right? And then to make it, you want it to make it look good, so you need to deal with it. Jay, I don't want to go too much longer, so I just want to ask you, where can people reach out to you? I think LinkedIn's probably one of the good places. Let people know how they can reach out.
Yeah, LinkedIn is always the first place. Hey, if you're at a big show, I'm most likely going to be walking that show. So, but yeah, you could always find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on there. I feel like I spend half my day on there, but that's always a good place to find me.
And can you spell your last name for everyone too? So it's Jay and then Menashe is?
Yeah, Menashe, Menashe. Menashe, but pronounced Menashe.
There we go. Good. Hey, Jay, thanks so much for coming on. I feel like we could probably connect down the road and go in some different directions with this, but I do appreciate your time, and I thank you for coming on the show.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Anders.
All right. Thanks, Jay. And to all our listeners, thanks for tuning in. And remember, until next time, stay engaged.
Thank you so much for listening to Engaging Personalities. If you believe this world needs more engagement and you're an industry leader or you have an interesting take on rehumanizing business, go to go.engagify.ai/podcast-guest to apply and come on the show. If you got something out of this interview, do you mind sharing it on your social media? Just grab a quick screenshot with your phone and text it to a friend or post it on the socials. If you know someone that would be a great guest, tag them on social media to let them know about the show. Include the hashtag Engaging Personalities. I love seeing your posts and guest suggestions. We are regularly putting out new episodes and content. To make sure you don't miss any episode, go ahead and subscribe. Your thumbs up, ratings, and reviews go a long way to help promote the show and mean a lot to me and my team. Want to know more? Go to our website, engagify.ai, or follow me on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening, and stay engaged.